The developers of Highguard say that they don't need player counts to be successful. As you can tell by this tweet here, this is obviously we don't need player counts to be a huge success. But as we're going to find out, they actually do, in fact, need player counts to be successful. Here we have also the PC Gamer is rather involved in this as well. I believe the PC Gamer to be mildly compromised as a reliable source of gaming information because they are also backing this Highguard didn't flop campaign. But as you see here, they actually got community noted on Twitter. So we know that obviously you can buy publicity on Twitter and with magazines, and they'll print whatever story you want. And here's the actual tweet. They actually have two sources here, one of them actually being the SteamDB info here. And we're going to click on this here and see what's up with the SteamDB on this game once it verifies I'm not a robot. And here we have, it looks like there's some mild progress here, and they only have about 2,000 players on here, but they peaked at almost 100,000 players. And it only rated a 45%. And here you see the overall players here, down here at the bottom, and then you have the other statistics on this game as well. So clearly the game is not doing well when they peaked at almost 100,000 players a little over 2 weeks ago, and right now they're at way less than that, at only barely 2,000. Over 2,000. So as you can see, they are paying for publicity. And we're going to actually take a look at the article that they posted as well. It is surprising to hear how expectant the Highguard studio was before launch. Despite running no public play tests, the mood ahead of the Game Awards reveal was that the competitive shooter would likely be a major hit, according to former employee of the now diminished studio. Now, however, I called this in some of my Twitter posts earlier this week that they do actually, in fact, need player bases or players to actually, be good, and that the game was a huge flop, and that they actually released the game in a beta form rather than the full-on polished game that it should have been, especially when one of their fixes was initially meant to be a temporary thing when it went from 3v3 to 5v5 matches, and now the 5v5 is now like the standard play format, especially in those huge maps that are to scale probably the size of Switzerland or bigger, and you only have 10 people in a map. So huge maps and small player counts in each game is not great. It is not any particular feature of Highguard that makes me think this confidence was misplaced. It's just the fact that most new shooters aren't massive hits. Actually, I would disagree. A lot of shooters are really big hits. This one flopped because it was not in a polished format. Even Fortnite, the model for the modern FPS live service mega hit, was shrugged off by the public before Epic's famous pivot to Battle Royale. Most have not been so lucky, and it hasn't mattered how successful they've previously been or even how good anyone thinks their game is. Remember, Gears of War designer Cliff Bleszinski's Lawbreakers? I thought it was fun. It wasn't a hit, and neither was Bleszinski's also fun Battle Royale pivot attempt. Radical Heights. That studio's long gone. As pointlessly rabid as the social media response to Highguard has been, I don't think the internet's recreational cruelty is to blame for the modest player base. I don't think any deep analysis at all is required to understand why Highguard isn't a huge hit. It's a decent game. Morgan gave it a 65% in his review. But even if it had been a great game, it wouldn't necessarily have blown up like Arc Raiders, because most games don't. They gave it a 65%, which is barely mid. It's just meh. It's an okay game. It's not even that good. It's passable at best. So even their own reviewer thought it was largely not great. So you can't call it good if your own rater called it not great. Cool new shooters of every variety release every year. And the default state for all of them, no matter how good they are or how much money was spent to develop them, is not millions of players. Here are some examples. And StarCraft, it's not a shooter, it's like a Strafstat, one of their favorite games of 2024. Peak Steam concurrence was 2,200. And then Echo Point Nova was 1,100. Mycopunk, a recent co-op shooter, Steam concurrence 2,800. Enlisted, interesting sounding free-to-play shooter, 7,500. Frag Punk, a 5v5 hero shooter, 113,000, nearly 114,000 players at peak, and is now just hovering at around 2,000. Quake Champions an honest attempt to bring Quake into the modern era. All-time Steam concurrence was 17,000. Yes, it peaked at 113, which is still better than what Highguard peaked at. The couple thousand concurrent Steam players Highguard has right now puts it in league with those games. Difference is those games are older now, and people weren't as it probably... I'm trying to figure out a good way to phrase this, but people aren't necessarily willing to accept just kind of crap games. Back then, the technology couldn't keep up with what people wanted, so we were at a restriction in that aspect. And here, that restriction is not nearly as prevalent, and so we don't have to worry about that. We just have to worry about people creating good games. And while I agree that shooters by and large are not super popular when they first come out necessarily, you can still put out a good game. And from all the things that I have seen and, previews and gameplay that I've seen of this game, even the release wasn't that great. Like the graphics were iffy. There were a lot of render issues and collision issues. The maps were absolutely massive, and you could only have 6 people in a game totals, 3v3, which would restrict the amount of actual shooting that you can do in a shooting game. And then the attempts that they made to try to fix all of that was too little, way too late. And they basically released the game in a beta test format rather than what I would consider to be a polished and finished game that should have been released. The couple of thousand concurrent Steam players Highguard has right now puts it in league with those games, and why would it be in a different league? Because the developers worked on Apex Legends. Ubisoft's X-Defiant was led by Mark Rubin, whose credits include Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2, games that defined many of the elements still seen in modern shooters. I liked it. It didn't last long. Yeah, but those are shooters that were good. They were excellent on release. And those are the kind of shooters that people want to play. They don't want to play the huge map nonsense. People just aren't as into the battle royale thing as they used to be. By and large, I would imagine. I mean, I've seen some of the amount of people that are playing Fortnite, and while it still has a huge following, and that's because a lot of the gamers that play it at this point, because it's been out so long, have essentially grown up playing it, so they stick to it because it's still a game that they know and they've grown up playing. That's why that game is still huge. Rocket Arena, the shooter EA launched in 2020 and took off sale in 2023. Why would they not remember Rocket Arena? A lot of people remember it. But the studio behind it was founded by a top designer on Halo 4 and 5. Also, massive shooters that were super popular that when they came out. So if you have all of these people that were involved in Highguard, why did they release such a crap game that shouldn't have happened? The Rocket Arena studio, Final Strike, is still around though. It worked on Fortnite's OG season, and now it apparently has a new tactical shooter in development. There are other studios like it. An Epic exclusive arena shooter with origins in the pro Quake scene didn't really break into the mainstream, but GD Studio has gone on to release roguelite spin-off on Steam. Keeping a studio going and perhaps one day iterating your way to hit territory may be the only kind of success it's reasonable to shoot for. Almost half of the games released on Steam last year received fewer than 10 user reviews. Highguard has done quite well by comparison. It's only a flop next to the very rare games that are immediately massive hits. I would say that a lot of games are massive hits, and it's actually the flops that are rare. Alas, despite telling us just before launch that Highguard didn't need super huge player counts to succeed, the studio was clearly betting on being one of those exceptional games, because a normal launch wasn't enough to keep most of its staff employed. I hope they all land on their feet. Well, actually, about that, and we're going to see this in the next article, but a mass majority of the developers that created this game are actually getting, because they created such a garbage game. You see here, most of the Highguard studio has been laid off. If they didn't need player counts and a good release, then their players wouldn't be fired. Layoffs have hit the development studio Wildlight Entertainment, makers of the recently released multiplayer shooter Highguard. This comes just over 2 weeks after free-to-play game's January 26th launch. Former senior-level designer Alex Granner posted on LinkedIn, "Unfortunately, along with most of the team at Wildlight, I was laid off today. While the number of people who were laid off has not currently been confirmed, the studio's LinkedIn page states that its size was 51 to 200 employees. That's a huge range. Wildlight's official Twitter account confirmed the layoffs with a statement reading, Today we made an incredibly difficult decision to part ways with a number of our team members while keeping a core group of developers to continue innovating on and supporting the game. Why would they continue to support the game? They know it's garbage. They released it as such, and at this point they're just refusing to let it die. And I think that they should just move on to the next project. You know, patch it here and there as issues come up. But by and large, I think they should move on to something else. Leave the failures on the floor, so to speak, and try to actually finish a game before they release it. On Blue Sky, Matt Piscatella from Circania, which tracks game sales and engagement, highlighted Highguard debuted in the top 10 in weekly active users on US Steam, was top 20 on both US PlayStation and Xbox, and yet according to SteamDB, Highguard reached a peak concurrent player count of 97,000 on PC via Steam on release day, and experienced a sharp decline with only 4,500 players 2 weeks after launch. So that should tell you that even though they said the game was going to be great, it lost almost all of its players in 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, they actually released patches to try to retain some of those people that were leaving or try to tease back the players that had left. And while it did see a little bit of a spike at the time, the spike quickly nosedived again when they realized that what they didn't actually fix the game to an acceptable level. Granner also said, this one really stings as there was a lot of unreleased content, and I was really looking forward to that, and I and the others designed for Highguard. Well, if you designed a whole bunch of stuff, maybe if you'd have put it in the game, then people wouldn't have left as quickly. While it initially had 3v3 competitive mode, which was trash, a 5v5 mode was implemented just days after release due to player reception to the small scale of the original mode. What was the small scale of the players in each game and the massive size of the maps? It was that combination that forced people to leave. The team revealed a content roadmap on launch day that included updates with new items, modes, and characters each month throughout the year, packed into 7 separate episodes. It's unclear how the layoffs will affect the studio's plans as of now, but Wildlight says it'll continue to support the game. And they add here that the story is ongoing. I don't know why they would. There's no need. This game is all but dead at this point, and I think they should just drop it and move on to something more successful, or that could be more successful. Anyway, catch you guys in the next video. Look forward to more video game updates in the near future. Later, y'all. Bye.